Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Bowie Manning here. Welcome to a Wednesday edition of the Garden Report with Law Murray back again. Talked to you a couple of weeks ago, Law, when the season was still going. Now it's over for the Celtics.
Yep. Well, they won one of those games. They were able to extend their semifinal series against the Knicks, and then they got absolutely annihilated at the Garden. So yeah.
We talked before Game 4, I think it was. I want to say maybe it was before Game 3.
It was before
Game 3-0. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they end up winning that one. Game 4, an unimaginable debacle that leads to some of the stuff we're going to talk about here with Tatum getting hurt at the end. But it was a disappointing series even before that. Still hard to believe they lost to the Knicks team as handily as they did, with how shaky the Knicks look again in this series, starting to line up, losing their minutes, defensive concerns, not being able to play Brunson and Cat together. We'll get to all that in a little bit, but the reason I brought you through here today is a report from Brian Robb, Mass Live. I also heard Simmons and Zach Lowe kicking something that sounded like the Clippers around to me last night, saying that a team that might have had interest in Jrue Holiday previously could explore adding him again, and that rang out to me as Clippers. I think there were some other teams, maybe the Heat, maybe the Warriors, who were interested in him at that time. But Clippers were definitely a big suitor. Couldn't get the deal done. Celtics trade Rob, Brogdon, all those picks for him. So this time around, 2 years later, 2 years older, obviously, and a new extension in place, which I think is the real big factor here we got to consider. Right. Is this a fit for the Clippers?
2 years ago it was. Before you locked down and secure James Harden, I explored it in some detail, but James was their target then. James has a player option. James Harden has a player option now that he can opt into for $36 million. I would expect him to opt out. He was just named All-NBA, so I could see him getting, opt in and get more years, get more security. He earned that much. Keep him happy. I think James wants to be here. And short of that, I don't see the fit as well with Jrue in 2025 as I did in 2023 as far as the Clippers are concerned. It's not that Jrue's a bad player and anything like that, or that you wouldn't want a player like him on your team, but for what Jrue does well, like, you already have a player like that in Chris Dunn, who is going to make like $25 million less than Jrue, who's younger than Jrue, who arguably is at least as athletic, right around the same size. And the key thing for me is the role. I think that this isn't something that it sounds like would come from the Clippers side of things, because you have to. So much of my basketball epiphany over the last year or so has been, what do players do? What are you going to ask a player to do? Right? Like, I love positions. I love, describing what positions players are, but it's not, my pushback is always going to be like, I want to understand positions because there are three things I need to know. I need to know, what do you do with the ball? Who do you guard? And who can you play with? Okay. Like, being that it's a 5, you got to have 5 players out there, Bobby. Last time I checked in an NBA game, right? So Jrue's not a point guard to me. He's a player who can do that, but he's more of a 3-and-D player at this stage of his career with what he's asked to do. And the Clippers are already relatively small on the wing. So if you keep James, Jrue's way too expensive and just not worth compromising your depth for. And if you don't keep James and you're pretending like Jrue's that kind of player where he can be a primary playmaker, I don't think that fits what the Clippers are trying to do going forward from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would probably like the fit more than you do, depending on what goes out in this kind of trade. And there's a couple of things we can look at here in terms of how it would actually happen. There'd be a lot going out though, and I think that's a challenge for most teams in a Jrue deal is giving up 3, 4, 5 players potentially, hard capping yourself in that scenario. And the Clippers are, as I look at it right now, 23 under the first apron. So second apron, that would get them, 30, 40 amount in that range. Let me double check that real quick. Yeah. So bringing in Jrue for a couple guys, keep them pretty tight up against that, needing to add a couple players coming in. And as you mentioned, the Harden factor with the player option, how much is he looking for this summer potentially?
I mean, that part I haven't quite gotten into yet, but he's slated to make 36 million if he picks up the option. You only have that option if you have something happen that is unexpected,
Yeah.
something physical or a relationship breakdown. Well, James is healthy, and not just healthy, but he literally just had his first All NBA season since the bubble, right? And there has been no relationship breakdown to the point where you had what you had 2 years ago, which is James opting in so that he could demand a trade. And you saw how that charade went, all summer 2023. So as I sit here end of May, I don't see any of that. I think you opt out so that you can secure your future. If James does get hurt next year, you don't want to be a 2026 free agent. You want to say, hey, I got guaranteed money after the next year. I think James would want to opt out. Maybe get that number in the 35 to 40 range for sure. But I also don't think James is trying to break the bank, because what's the point of that when you're trying to at least talk yourself into winning at a higher level than the Clippers won this year? So that's my expectation. Like a 2-year fully guaranteed thing, 35 to 40 million a year. But we got to see where it goes next month.
So yeah, 35, 40, you're still in a $30 million second apron range if you're the Clippers there. And looking at it, Powell's probably going to need a new deal here at some point soon. So that's long-term money. Kawhi's starting a new deal. That's long-term money. Is Zoo signed long-term at this point?
Zoo just got extended. And
yeah. So
he saw the year that he had. So you had an outstanding year. He just missed All NBA, which is incredible for a player of his stature. They're pretty clean as far as their plan. You brought up Norm, and Norm is, to me, the biggest wild card. I've mentioned this on previous when people have asked me this month to talk about the Clippers, something I haven't really been super interested in doing this month. I'm very next month is the time to talk about them, as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of basketball being played right now. Although that's starting to come to an end this week as well, with both conference finalists in elimination games from here on out. But Norm is the big one, and Norm affects what would happen with a guy like a Jrue Holiday type of acquisition. It's like the Clippers, if they're going to get off of and seriously remake their rotation, it's to get a guy who can hypothetically guard an Aaron Gordon in a playoff setting, because that's what ended their season. If we're just going to be real, like the Clippers had literally an All NBA defender in Zoo, and he did a fair job on Nikola Jokic, right? Pretty respectable performance there. They were great at the point of attack all year. Chris Dunn and Derrick Jones Jr. were signed to improve that specific part of the Clippers defense, and they did that. From a coaching standpoint, Jeff Van Gundy remade the Clippers defense, not just from a schematic standpoint, but from a focus standpoint. That team rebounded, as far as defensive rebounding, They were the best defensive rebounding team in the NBA. So if you can criticize the Clippers and their rebounding defensively, you can criticize every team in the NBA from that perspective. It's about positional, what you can do positionally. And Norman is a guy that you hide right now, and James Harden is a guy that you put on fours so that guys like Derrick Jones Jr. or Kawhi Leonard can guard wings. If you take James off, that changes how you can use your guards. Right now, Norman is your one hide guy. If you're going to change your starting lineup, or if you're going to trade Norm, you need to trade Norm to get bigger or to get a better, ball handler. But someone who, honestly, again, Jrue, I just think is too far along in his career. And that dude has a $37 million player option in 2027?
Yep.
Yeah, again, I love Jrue Holiday. I think he would have been a great fit for this team.
LA guy.
And obviously he would love to come here, I'm sure, but yeah, I don't think that the Clippers are interested in a 35-year-old small guard who would just be making as much as he is, not just next year, but for years to come.
Yeah, I think you made an interesting point too. Was this coming from the Clippers side? I'd probably lean no as well.
Hell no. Because if you're Boston and you are the team that needs to do some things, then you're trying to drum up and get more teams to appear,
I think it makes sense,
as if there's a sweepstakes, and to get yourself the best offer. It makes Jrue is very clearly the guy that you got to find a rehome for, because you're in a gap year. I saw it myself. The Jason Tatum injury hits me very close to home, because in 2021, we were talking about this briefly before we went live. 2021 is my first playoffs at the Athletic, right? I've covered Clippers playoff series before, but it was the first time I was covering one at the Athletic. And my first plane ride that whole year was to go to Salt Lake City, Utah for Game 5 of the semifinals. And we thought Kawhi Leonard would be fine after, he took that shot in transition in Game 4 of the Jazz series from Joe Ingles. And he was not fine. It turned out he had a serious knee injury. We learned later that he needed surgery to repair a partially torn ACL. He didn't play for a year. That's the Celtics. Kawhi hadn't even turned 30 yet, right? He hadn't turned 30 when he got hurt. And Jason Tatum is a player who just tore his Achilles tendon after establishing himself as a first-team All-NBA player. There's not a lot of precedent for Jason's situation or for the Boston Celtics situation. I'm not talking about dudes who are in their 30s when they get hurt like this, or dudes who they might have bright futures, but they hadn't quite established themselves as first-team guys yet. No, Tatum he's a top 5 guy, okay? And now you're in a situation where you are entering a gap year, and you as a franchise are like, we're going to get this guy back, but it's going to be a while. And we can't hold some of these contracts, some of these vets hostage. And so we need to make moves. Jrue Holiday in 2025 is Patrick Beverley in 2021. Pat Beverley was a guy who the Clippers loved. Point of attack defender, had injury issues, so the availability was a concern. But when he was there, he was there. The Clippers were like, we're trading you. We're bringing in Eric Bledsoe, in part because, they thought Paul George, who in the Celtics at 2025 correlation here is Jaylen Brown. Okay.
Yep.
He's like, he's going to need some ball handling help. And yeah, I know Patrick Beverley is the nominal point guard, but we need to move on to a player who is more traditional fits. And it didn't quite work for the Clippers, obviously. Bledsoe started with Reggie Jackson, wound up losing his starting job, was better as a backup. But when he got traded, ironically, for Norman Powell, Eric Bledsoe never played in the NBA again, right? But the Clippers clearly remade their roster with, the understanding that you need to support your remaining star and you need to just enter a gap year understanding how you're going to have to play in the short term, but also in the long term. That guy that you got, your main guy missing a year will come back. So, the Celtics have work to do. They have work to do. They have to find a home for Jrue. And they got to do that with Chris Porzingis too. Chris Porzingis doing with that post-viral syndrome or whatever the heck you want to call it. His value is in the toilet probably compared to what it would have been if he didn't get ill.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work to do, Bobby.
That's why I think some of this work goes into the year. And I want to get into all of that. I want to remind everyone as well, we are listening to the Garden Report, part of the CLNS Media Network. So make sure to hit subscribe, turn on notifications when new video drops on the channel. We could be going live any night now with some news. It's the off season, you never know. So if something happens, hit the notification button there and you'll know exactly when we go live. Also subscribe to our other channels here. NBA history, Patriots press pass. They had a practice down at Foxborough today, so a ton of coverage over there. Make sure you subscribe to their coverage over there. Amazing stuff from them. Taylor, Mike, all the rest. Bruins ringside, their offseason is heating up as well. So what do they do, Law? I don't know. I've been asking everybody.
I love how your promo sounds like a threat. Yo, you don't know what might happen. It's the offseason. Like
this offseason,
come live at 2 a.m. You just got to be ready for Bobby, man.
I was live at 2 a.m. once. I was live at midnight when Marcus Smart got traded that night in the Porzingis deal. I was live at who knows what hour when Kevin Durant got traded to Phoenix because no one else was up. Just me. I'm the only fool up at 3 a.m. every night to do shows. So, yeah, people know I'll be there. But what should they do, if you were in their shoes? You're right. They have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of tough decisions to make. The Tatum thing makes it a little easier, I think, to say, all right, let's reset the second apron clock, certainly. Not freeze our 2033 pick here. Not have those penalties repeating every single year that we're going to do the second apron thing. The Clippers just made a pretty similar decision a year ago, along with the tax. So that's a decision for the Celtics here as well. Do you want to go even further and dodge the tax this year? Because right now their payroll is about $250, their tax is about $250. So they're spending money right now that even Steve Ballmer didn't spend back in the day when he was known as the biggest spender in the league alongside Golden State out there. So
that new CBA is tough, man. It has guys that they want to keep. You gotta let go. Trades are being made to create flexibility, but also, I mean, the CBA is really difficult in terms of managing your team year over year. The Clippers warned us that when Paul George left, they were going to be the team that people were like, "Why are you doing this?" But it would make sense a year later. And it didn't even take a year. You saw what the Timberwolves did. The Timberwolves should have Karl Anthony Towns on their team right now.
Right, and that's the two routes you can take to do this. And the Clippers are so smart looking back on it. I know they wanted to sign him for a different number, but ending up letting him go is the straightest path to avoiding these penalties and these limitations and restrictions now. And what they got out of that was Derek Jones, done all these pieces that helped them last year. Batum comes back, yeah. So that was a great move. Looking back on it, maybe it was stroke of fortune that Philly offers that and takes him off their hands, but that's the way to do it now. The Towns route is probably how not to do it. I know Randall's been all right, and DiVincenzo's a nice player, but I look at that trade and say Minnesota probably lost that one, even though they end up back in the West Finals the next year. But that's just stuff you have to do if you're locking in on long-term money for guys.
Right. And you see Minnesota is about to this is about to be a critical offseason once again, as far as the decisions that need to be made. Like, what do you do with Julius Randle? Considering I'm pretty sure Julius has a option, and that option is one reason why we felt like the Knicks were going to blink at some point last year. The Knicks were like, oh, yeah, Julius is going to get some center minutes. Hell no. Stop tripping. And that's why when that trade went down, I'm like, y'all bailed the Knicks out. I wanted to see the Knicks sweat. But what are y'all going to do? Y'all ain't got no real center. Well, they got Cat out of it, you know. And now the Timberwolves are like, what do you think of Julius after you saw him have a uneven start to the year pre-All-Star break? But he was great after the All-Star break, and he played the best. This is the best postseason we've ever seen from him. But Julius is a dangerous player when you look at his age. I'm not saying he's old, but he ain't in his 20s anymore. And he's not explosive, if you will. He's had these nicks and these injuries that, you know, his play style is that he's going to be dealing with that, not that it's going to be a relief over time. You know, that's going to be tricky. And then Naz Reid, he's another one. He's got a player option. He has every reason to opt out of that thing if he can find the money, right? I know Minnesota would love him back. Minnesota loves Naz Reid. You know what I'm saying? I can't go a comment section without Naz Reid showing up on that John. But, I mean, you have some decisions to make if you're Minnesota. And a lot of those decisions, the players have the leverage. So that's a tough thing right there, and that's a team that succeeded this postseason.
So that's why, you know, when you look at what's going on there, when you look at what's going on with the Clippers now, those are two models, I think, of how to handle this if you're the Celtics. And with that being said, I'm holding on to Jaylen Brown for now. Not making a rash decision on that one. You pay
Jaylen Brown. He's your star. He's the guy that it's not just about this year coming up, 2025, 26. But when Tatum comes back, the Achilles is thank God I've never suffered this injury, but people close to me have, and obviously we've been watching the NBA for a while. You don't want to be the only star coming back from that. Like, you want Jaylen Brown to play well next year, which will be the first year of his career where he's the undisputed guy.
I'm looking forward to that. Yep.
And then, you know, because like I said, this was me going into the 21-22 season about to cover the Clippers and Kawhi recovering from surgery. It was like Paul George got off to an outstanding start. And then Yusuf Nurkic falls on his arm and he misses 3 months. That was, I don't know how the hell the Clippers won 42 games that year. But that's what you're asking Jaylen to do in 2025-26. But when you bring Tatum back in 2026-27, which is what my expectation would be, because you are not bringing a role player back. You're bringing Jason freaking Tatum back, you know, a heliocentric offensive player. I don't think that's a thing where you rush that. You give that guy time to come back so he can be as close to the player that you're asking him to be as possible. He's going to need that adjustment to come back to NBA basketball, and Jaylen Brown playing at a high level helps with that, so that he can come back and get into a rhythm.
Ease your way in. It might take a couple months, might take a whole season. Yeah, so you're looking at a 2-year recovery here. Exactly. You're going to need Jaylen Brown to play outstanding basketball, which you're paying him to do. You just signed Jaylen Brown to this contract that he's going to make damn near $65 million in 2028-29. Like, he's not a free agent until 2029. You'll still have a respectable window. That's what we all expect from the Celtics. And everyone else should be like, hey, figure out what to do. You know, Al Horford's a free agent now. Like, you got to figure out, one, does he want to play? Does he want to play for you? How much do you bring him back? Stuff like that. Everybody else, I think you kind of have to explore some things. And you know, this might be Derek White's one opportunity to be an all-star next year. It's like the ball's going to be in your hands. You're saying no to Jrue Holiday. If you're the Clippers, you're probably like, what about White?
It's the same principle, though. Like, I think Derek is more ball in hand than Jrue is at this stage of his career. Yep. And what he's shown with the Celtics more relevantly, you know, with those two guys being teammates. But it's the same thing. The Clippers need to get bigger, younger, more athletic, guys who can actually fit into roles that are also, consummate with their salary, because bringing a $28 million player in like Derek White will either cost you a really good player or it's going to cost you some significant depth. And the Clippers don't have a wealth of either of those things. Again, I think in a vacuum, Derek White would be outstanding for the Clippers. Jrue Holiday, he would be outstanding for the Clippers. But it's the cost of what you're giving up to bring one of those players in. And if you're asking me, I would rather have Derek White than Jrue Holiday going forward. I'm not saying Derek's had a better career than Jrue, but I think Derek is, especially when you consider the salaries, I'd rather have Derek.
That's the problem the Celtics are going to run into. When they
that's their
offer
issue.
Holiday, these other teams, Dallas included, we did that yesterday here. They're probably looking back and saying, yeah, we prefer White. And that's the tough part of this extension for Holiday. $32 million next year is fine. That's good value for him. That's probably indicative of what he brings to the table next year. But you mentioned it's the 2 years beyond that, 37 at 37. That's tough. And it's a player option too. So let's get into it here before we continue some other topics, because I do want to look at how this would work here briefly and see if there's any path to getting something like this done for these two teams. And from a cap standpoint, there is. And there probably are some players here on 1-year deals effectively who Clippers would consider moving on from. So Holiday's going to LA obviously at 32. Bogdanovich is probably going to have to be the center of this thing. 16 next year, the non-guarantee the year after that. But then who else goes? Probably a Eubanks on an expiring deal. Jones, I doubt they would want to move on from, at least when I looked at this.
Yeah, like the thing with Derek is one of the few guys in he's the only athlete in his 20s on the entire team that plays.
Absolutely. And he was great last year.
He was great. The contract's amazing. Like he was,
I think he's off the table in this deal.
He was relatively durable. Like, yeah, you don't want to give up. Like Derek Jones Jr. is the exact kind of player the Clippers haven't really had. And like, nah, at $10 million a year, you're keeping that guy. That's the thing. It's like the Clippers, if I do think that a trade for would be exploratory for them. I just don't think that it would be a trade for a guard. You know what I'm saying? If anything, Porzingis would be a player who would be intriguing for the Clippers for a year. But the issue with Porzingis is, for a franchise that is annually snake bitten by ridiculous availability, Porzingis is incredibly uninspiring in that department. Like, if it ain't an illness like what we saw, it's his various leg injuries. I don't trip about his ACL anymore, but the Clippers got a firsthand look at what it's like to try and rely on Kristaps Porzingis in a playoff series, both in the bubble as well as in 2021. Like, he's a really good player, obviously. That's why he's a $30 million player. I'm sure you'd love to get a guy who can play the 4, play the 5, protect the rim, play with a guy who is a more traditional center. But he'll be 30 this summer. His mobility, I think, is declining. And you just can't rely on that dude physically. And I think that's going to give the Clippers some pause if they were in a position to consider Kristaps.
So I want to take a look at that in a second here, but this works. Bogdanovich, Eubanks, Cam Christie going over on 1-year guarantee. Dunn's the tough one to give up there, but Holiday would obviously be moving into that role, like you mentioned. Right. Only saves the Celtics $4 million. Fills up their roster, which is another challenge here. They'd have to move off some of these guys in the near future if they want to bring back any of their free agents. And then obviously for the Clippers, the challenge is at that point, 30 million below the second apron. Is that enough to bring back Harden? Is that enough to bring in 6 additional players, at least 5 for now, to get to 14? Probably. So, I'd call this feasible from a cap standpoint. But, what you mentioned there about the need for a guy like Holiday, I think is another question. But this isn't an
If you
enormous
were to
amount
give up,
to give up.
if you were to give up Dunn and Bogey to get Jrue, then you could sell it. I think that they would
You
want.
could
I
even
don't
put
think
Batum in for a done if you
they
really
ain't
want
gonna do
to.
that. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that much right now.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
So this is the trade right here to me. Jones isn't going. Batum isn't going. It would be a Bogdanovich, Eubanks, Dunn, Christie deal. And the plus, listen, no Celtics fan is going to look at this return and be like, oh, this is great. Done something on a 2-year, real solid deal. Depth guard who was great defensively last year.
And they know, they know Chris Dunn because he was there for a cup of coffee in the offseason a while back.
Yep. So scouted him for the draft, I'm sure, all those years ago, all that. So this works to me because all of these guys are on expiring deals if you want them to be. Bogdanovich, the second-year guarantee. Dunn, I believe, is non-guaranteed for his second year as well. And Christie, you make a call on his team option after this year. So, again, this works. Only saves you $4 million for now if you're Boston. So that's something you're going to have to keep working at there. Holiday comes back to LA. The big plus here, though, and again, I don't think too many people in the chat are going to love this one. I don't think you're sending any picks to the Clippers in this trade.
Yeah,
You might be sending picks to other teams.
Yeah, that's one of those where, I mean, the Celtics would be getting 2 rotation players. The Clippers would be getting the best player in a deal like that. You would start Jrue because the Clippers want to start Chris. What makes it hard to start Chris is the fact that you saw in the playoffs
The shooting.
Not just the shooting though. I feel like if Chris is with the Clippers next year, and Chris made an incredible impression on that franchise, not just the locker room and the coaches, but the staff loved him. He was, just an A1, A+ signing. Great signing. He was outstanding. If Chris is on the Clippers next year, shooting is shooting, it comes and goes, but I think he's got to be more aggressive. He is a former top 5 pick. And every now and then he kind of showed you that he was still that guy who could put his shoulder in the dude's chest and get a bucket in the paint, at the rim. He's not aggressive enough. He's too safe of a player offensively. And it's one thing if, you're being guarded so that the entire half of the floor you're left open to shoot, set shots or whatever. But eat that space up. That's what a Russell Westbrook does, Like, that dude is going to put some rim pressure. And Chris doesn't do that nearly enough. Chris makes you forget that he was a top 5 pick at the point guard position too often. And he still, got some juice to be able to do that more. So we'll see if you got to play with confidence. And I think Chris lost confidence in the playoffs. And the thing with Jrue is Jrue loves getting buckets over guys who are bigger than him. And he can still do that. Like, you wouldn't worry about that. So again, I think in a vacuum, Jrue would be great, but how many trades do the Clippers have in them? And is Jrue the kind of player that they should be targeting? In some regards, it's okay, but only if you're keeping Harden. I don't think Jrue's the guy that you want as your primary point guard.
Yeah, so since you mentioned him, let's look at the Kristaps side of things here. It's a similar deal, right? Except Porzingis is coming back to LA as an expiring, so maybe that is more enticing to the Clippers because it gives them some flexibility there, fills maybe a bigger position in need. I think it ends up being effectively the same trade, though, just based off the money there.
Yeah.
So we'll throw Porzingis in there. And in this case, you save 2. Clippers only adding on to there, which is important with the second apron stuff and the tax and all that. That's the other question we got to ask here too: is are the Clippers going to be a tax team next year?
Well, I know the Clippers don't have a problem with it. That's going to be that's going to be the thing for them. Like they still have the support. That front office has the support from ownership to be able to do whatever they feel like is going to make them not just competitive, but to be the best team that the means this this particular CBA will allow them to be. So that's what I know. But what I can say is the Clippers don't want to be reckless about how they're building their team. And if they're being real, like their future is more important than their present. That's not the case for every team. Ordinarily, it wouldn't be the case for the Clippers, but like, look at the Clippers. They haven't won a playoff series since 2021.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't won a playoff series since Kawhi came back from the ACL. Like you're not a contender. So it's not, to me anyway, just again, my opinion. I'm not sure that the organization shares my opinion, but they're not in a place where they can just be like, we're going for it all in 1 year, especially in the West. I think you got to be more careful about the team that you're building long term. And the player that leads the next contender for the Clippers, I don't think is on the roster right now. That's just where I'm at. Kawhi Leonard and James Harden are still their contracts are still, their rights are still at the Clippers. They're not going to say that. Those stars aren't going to say that. No one with the team is going to say that. I'm not tied to them, so I'm going to say it because it's up to them to change that with those guys on the team for me to think otherwise.
Yeah, and so I think both those players don't put you in that position, and that's the challenge here. We're talking about the second apron, but it's really the tax. And as I had up there a second ago, Porzingis brings you within about 12 of the tax with 9 players. Holiday more like 10. Then Harden's contract, if that bumps up closer to 40, you're talking like $5, $6, $7, $8 million below the tax to build the rest of the team, and that's not a ton of flexibility.
I'm not doing that for Kristaps Porzingis. Like,
yeah,
all due respect. And
so I'll say this: you mentioned him earlier, and this is a pretty firm stance I'm developing going into this summer. I think you keep Porzingis. I think you hold on to him into this year. See if he can reestablish himself, move past this illness, move past all that weirdness at the start of last year. You do need a center if Horford's going to move on. If Cornette moves on as well, it's certainly possible you lose both of those guys here. And he's still only, 29, 30?
It's him and Queta is the only guys. Yeah. I don't even know if Queta's under contract, but if he is.
He's got a partial guarantee, but he'll be back, I'd imagine. Just they lost trust in him. So, there's very little at center you feel great about going forward. And there's no urgency to trade Porzingis on expiring. I think you can trade an expiring into the season if things don't go well to start the year.
Yeah, and plus...
Or you could just let it expire.
Yeah, and letting contracts expire ain't the worst thing for teams, because they'll just...
That's what the Clippers did with George.
Yeah, like they'll just be like, all right, well, we're going to figure out what to do afterwards, We used to live in a time where you get chastised for not, quote unquote, getting something for a guy's deal that's expired. And it's like, these teams are getting more comfortable with the idea of we don't have to take on guys that we don't want, or these draft picks lose so much value once you actually use them. And the thing with this quote unquote idea of parity is like, look, if you don't control your draft for years, which is the case with the Clippers, that's the case with the Milwaukee Bucks, you're not blowing it up. Like, what are you blowing it up for? And you're blowing it up after getting the draft picks from a team that is going to compete. Your draft picks aren't going to be premium picks. You're not getting premium picks because you traded them already. Like, you have to think, we have to kind of reprogram how we're looking at the aftermath of expiring contracts. So I think these agents are in the same boat. You know, these players aren't quote unquote betting on themselves like they used to. These players are taking the money because they don't want to get in the situation where, you know, it's musical chairs and you're left without one of them chairs.
Yeah, and I want to get into the other series going on right now in the East. Or I guess there's only 2 left here, but again, shout out to CLNS Media, Celtics All Access. Make sure you subscribe to both those channels and leave a review. We're on Spotify. We got all these podcasts coming out on the audio side too the next day if you don't catch them. So subscribe over there, and go ahead and hit like and subscribe on this YouTube channel, as well as history, NBA history on CLNS, Patriots Press Pass, Bruins Rinkside as well. All our channels here on the network. And I want to give a quick shout out tonight, as well as we record this, to the Prize Picks app right now. And they have a free square going tonight that you can take advantage of if you would like. Anthony Edwards, perhaps battling for his season, or definitely battling for his season here, trying to keep it alive. You now have a free square going into this game. 0.5 points for Anthony Edwards gets you one of your squares. And, you know, with Prize Picks, pick 2 or more players, pick more or less on their stat projections. That's all you need to have your daily fantasy team over there. Last chance potentially in that series between the Wolves and the Thunder. And I'd imagine this will be the end of the road for Minnesota. We'll see. So again, as always, get 50 instantly when you play $5 over there with the code CLNS. And again, right now, up until game time tonight, you can get a free Anthony Edwards square. Always doing great stuff like that over there on Prize Picks, so check that out. Let's get to the other series now. Knicks Pacers. Watching this thing's tough for Celtics fans, I think. I think you're looking at this.
They should have carried the Knicks.
Yep, I think that's what every Celtics fan is thinking right now. Even with the injuries, even with everything that went down there, Porzingis. And the thing I'll say with Porzingis here, because I think some people are going to say, oh, you know, Porzingis gets sick and this and that happens, and that's why they lost. They didn't have to keep playing Porzingis. Could have went some different directions there. Could have tried some other stuff. And honestly, to the Knicks' credit, even though they're down 3-1 right now, the biggest takeaway I've had from the series, or I guess one of the bigger takeaways, is when you're deep into the playoffs, when you're going deeper into a series here, they win that game 3 because they tapped into DeLon Wright, Landry Shamet, some of these guys off their bench who just haven't played, and they're a little fresher. They're able to bring a little bit of burst on defense. And that's something the Celtics did a little bit of in that series, starting Cornette in the game 6, playing him a little more in game 5, tapping into Pritchard's minutes a little more there. But it was too little too late by then. And I don't think the Celtics, a deep team, a team that we've talked about all year being able to utilize their depth maybe as well as any in the league, got a little tight, a little thin, and a little reliant on some of their main guys who weren't playing as well, specifically Porzingis. I can't believe he played as much as he did through the illness when he was so limited looking back on it.
I mean, these teams, if you preach no excuses and you gotta have Tatum level injuries to miss games, you know, like that's pretty much what it is. I think though there's a lack of transparency when it comes to, you know, player wellness and availability in the postseason. I think the Boston Celtics, unfortunately for them, they've been the poster child for this long before any of those guys. I mean, Isaiah Thomas, Robert Williams, and his knee issues, trying to play through shit. Like, this is the generation of the Celtics. Like, they're like, all right, you go out there and go. Like, it would have been refreshing for them to just be honest about what Porzingis was able to do and to not play him. And I'm not saying it cost them a series or anything like that, but it is what it is. So
yeah, because part of it, I think, is the coach being deferential to a guy who wants to fight through it, who wants to play through it. Exactly. In part because even going back to the first stint with the illness in March, he did not like the fact that fans were wondering, is he just sitting out? Is he not being tough? Is he, you know, not pushing through this thing? And that bothered him. And he even sent out a tweet at halftime of one of the games saying, we can't figure out what this thing is. We're trying to work through it right now, and hopefully I'll be back strong soon. And that was unusual for a player. Usually a player doesn't tweet out their injury update at halftime of a game. So I think it's pretty clear. Yeah.
Like
I think it's pretty clear this thing bothered
content,
him.
all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's tough, but I just come back to this. If you are up 20 multiple times at home to begin a series, and then even the Tatum injury game, you're up 14 in the third quarter. It's just a matter of game management at that point. You know, those are games that they honestly should have swept them dudes. You know, they swept them during the regular season. Like, they played a style of basketball that is kryptonite for the New York Knicks. It's just really unfortunate that they pretty much built these leads and forgot how to play basketball to finish games. And I give the Knicks credit for one thing and one thing only, and that was actually completing games. You know, they played 4 quarters. They got smacked. They were down double digits in 5 of those 6 games, Bobby. The
only reason they're not done in this series is because of a big 20-point comeback.
Yeah, and even that game was a cancellation because the Knicks should have won game 1. You know, the Knicks were up 17 in game 1, and they smoked that game. And it took some of the craziest shooting you've ever seen from a player, Nesmith, and one of the craziest shots that you ever saw from Tyrese Halliburton to force that overtime. But the Knicks got what they deserved in game 1.
Finals MVP, or is that a given for Halliburton?
He's not going to get it. It's going to be Tyrese because that's just how these things go.
Not last year, though. Jaylen Brown went home with it.
Yeah, like, I just feel like, I mean, Nesmith has been great, but given how people vote for those things, they're going to want to give Tyrese his trophy because they don't want to stir up, hey, you guys think I'm overrated again? You know, even though media didn't have a whole lot to do with, again, that was my outlet, you know, but the player, that was like a baker's dozen, the players who bothered to mention Tyrese as far as that question, you know what I mean? But you're familiar with Aaron Nesmith, who drafted him?
Yep, the Boston Celtics, and I loved him. Loved covering him. Loved tracking his journey. I was at his first summer league, following him around out there. Joe Mazzulla coached his first summer league team, and they worked out together back then.
Look, give the Celtics credit. Great draft pick, you know, and they got a 6th man of the year out of it. And then they traded that 6th man of the year for the player that we discussed at the top.
How about Danny Ainge, man? He had a run, and, you know, 2019 was probably the low point of this run. Romeo Langford, a couple other second-round guys who weren't great. But every year through that run, and 2020 was his final year in the end, or 2021 rather. 2020, they go Nesmith and Peyton Pritchard. 2019, they end up getting Grant Williams out of that one. 2018, you get Robert Williams. 17 is Tatum, when everyone's saying to take Markelle Fultz.
And honestly, I don't even know who they should have picked in 14, you know, when they picked Romeo. Like, I mean, that draft wasn't super strong
19.
outside the lottery. You know what I mean? You could say Nikhil, but that's revisionist history.
That's who I wanted at the time, I remember, because I watched him. I was at Syracuse at the time, so I saw. They
would have traded him. Nikhil wouldn't have. I don't think he would have made it in Boston. I think Nikhil in New Orleans, he had even more opportunity than he would have gotten in Boston. And you see, Nikhil needed to get traded to be the player that he is now. Well, by the way, Nikhil's another one who's going to get paid this summer.
Celtics fans talked for a long time about this. They lost a coin flip with the Heat and got 14 because they could have picked Tyler Hero if that went the other way. Maybe they would have.
Tyler Hero would have been the rich man version of Peyton Pritchard.
But Grant was a great pick that year. I thought he had a real nice career in Boston. And then, absolutely. 17, it's Tatum. 16, it's Jaylen Brown. 15 was even Terry Rozier. And 14 was Marcus Smart. I mean, he went 6 years of picking guys who are going to play a decade in this league.
The year before that was KO.
Kelly Olynyk, who's had a rock solid career. Now,
Kelly Olynyk was
It wasn't Giannis, but
That dude wound up being the best Kelly in a playoff series with Kelly Oubre. I remember that.
yeah. No, I mean he was
On a
great in
rookie deal.
Boston. 2013, probably the last time you have to go back to that Ainge really didn't get much out of a draft. But yeah, it was a hell of a run for him. And the Celtics continue to reap the benefits of that between Brown and Tatum, which is really the only thing holding this thing together right now is they get expensive and roster looks like it's going to deteriorate a little bit this summer. I'll ask you this too, because I haven't brought this up on the show and I know a lot of people are asking about it. As we mentioned, what happened in that last playoff series there. I haven't confirmed this, but a couple outlets have reported that, including The Athletic, at that time, Shams, I believe, said he had a 3-year extension starting in 24. So 24, 25, 26, that would put this as the last year on Joe's deal. So they're going to have to decide whether they're extending him this summer. I'm sure that'll be a question going in the camp if they don't. And that's a tricky thing. I believe Ty Lue went through that a couple of years ago, right? With his extension, whether he was going to stay in LA and all that.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is a tough question. I know some fans might feel differently. There's mixed opinions on Joe. He just led you to 3 straight 60-win years, or right about that. You know, I think they were just under 60 in 2023. A couple East Finals, a championship. Certainly above all else here in 3 years. This year was disappointing. I don't think he coached a great series against the Knicks. But to me, that's not a reason to move on from a coach. One bad series. I mean, I guess it's 2 with the Heat a couple years ago, but those were completely different circumstances.
I think the Heat, this is, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I don't get to talk about that series ever. I loved how that series progressed. Because that dude told everybody that he lost the damn locker room, or maybe perhaps he did. And then they forced a game 7 after being down 3-0. I thought he, was vulnerable and honest about what the situation was. And they
now
did
the owner
something
storm in the
that
locker room after game 3 probably helped a little bit with that, but
I'll just say it's like the Athletic let me write about 3-0 comebacks. The fact is no one's ever completed it in the NBA, but them dudes forced a game 7 that they got to host, and damn it, I would have
on the
loved
first possession of that game, Jason
I would
Tatum
have
got
loved
hurt.
to see what had happened if JT didn't get hurt. You know what I mean? And that's no excuse. And he got hurt, and them dudes didn't step up. They got shot out of the building by Caleb Martin. But I was impressed with how that team responded to being down 3-0. And then the next year they win a championship. And then this year they still won 61 games. They did well in a first round series that I felt like I'm a huge Orlando Magic fan because they are the most god-awful shooting team among every team, not just playoff teams. And yet they compete, they defend, they do some of the things where if they can get their main guys healthy, their main guys being Paolo, Franz Wagner, and Jalen Suggs, who Jalen once again got hurt and wasn't able to play at all in the playoffs. I think that they can be, a top 3-4 seed, a real problem as soon as next year. And the Celtics did really well in that series. They had to figure some things out. They had guys out. I thought they did well. And yeah, I was extremely disappointed in the Celtics for how they went out against the Knicks. Joe, I think, is a good coach. I don't think he's a product of just his talent. I think he's a good coach. He does the things that you need to do, especially in that damn city, where he can just focus on the basketball and his team. I think you don't take that for granted. The fact is, they were fortunate that he was lying around on their staff to begin with when they got Ime out the paint. You know what I mean? Like, he was their 3rd coach in 3 years, for crying out loud. Clearly, he works well with Brad. He was on Brad's staff. I don't think you take those things for granted. So
Brad loves him, by the way. I can't see Brad being the one who makes this.
Brad loves him. JT and him have this great chemistry. Like, that's a good coach to me, because so much of coaching in the NBA is being a damn politician. You know what I mean? Like, how well can you deal with the things that are under your control, and how well do you deal with the things that have nothing to do with you? You know, you're
And
the
let
one
me
who's got
pull
to
this
talk to
up
the
too.
media. You know.
Oh yeah, I mean that's going to continue to be fun for years here as long as he stays. Uh, Celtics record without Jason Tatum this year. There's been a real strength under Joe. 8-2 this year. Playoffs considered as well. They win that Magic game without him. So that's 9-2. They win a Knicks game without him. That's 10-2, and then they lose the finale. So 10-3 without Tatum this year. The record's great without Brown. The record's great without pretty much everybody except for Derek White, which says a lot.
Yeah.
The biggest reason, and there's a lot of reasons I think you keep Joe around here and extend him. They are so good when guys are out. Sometimes as many as 3 starting caliber guys, they'll win games without.
Yeah. I think there's a matter of playoffs, dictating things, but also it's just a matter of like you have to, foster some kind of stability, some kind of consistency. You just can't take for granted. I can't stand fans that would be like, fire the coach. And you know what? There are a lot of owners who are like that. We saw multiple coaches get fired right before the playoffs. We saw some of it. Hey, it worked out for Dave
Celtics
Madden.
got a new owner coming in, by the way, which will be interesting with all this too.
Yeah, and that owner got to see up close and personal. Joe's not going to want to have another playoff series like the next one. Like Joe Mazzulla's coached 9 playoff series, I think now. He better not have another playoff series like that next one. Like that's the kind of series that gets dudes. That's the kind of series that causes
it was bad
jobs.
I don't really understand it either because I mean he utilized his depth so well all year. There was a flexibility offensively with them that I liked into this year. It wasn't all about the threes, even though they shot a lot of them. It was handling leads. It was late game stuff. Those 2 plays to end the games 1 and 2 were so bad, especially the 110 regulation in game 1. And then
honestly, I just felt like they thought the Knicks were just going to stop playing.
Yep.
And like there's just a loss of focus and intensity. And the most dangerous part of a game for a lot of these teams, I don't care if you're a young team who's never been there or a veteran team who's literally the defending champ, the most dangerous part of the game. We saw with the Nuggets in 2023. They were up 20 in a game 7 at home. And they just stopped. They ran out of gas. There will be teams that feel like because they're up in big spots and against teams that have never done it, right? They'll stop playing and they'll be like, we're going to be okay because they're not going to keep playing. And that's how you get popped by the Knicks, or that's how you get popped by the Timberwolves,
And that's tough. And that's on the players to me. You win a championship the year before, you got to be above that. And we've seen champs handle things lightly, but then they lock in when they need to. And this team couldn't quite get there. I know game 3 was nice. Game 4, another collapse. I know 14, you don't think of that being a collapse, but up 14 in the third quarter, it was a collapse. And it went the other way.
How the game was going.
Yeah, they lost their poise. The crowd starts getting on them, and it looked like the old Celtics. And yeah, I mean, that's always going to be the debate here, right? Because people are like, oh, they had an easy path in 2024. And that was part of it. I feel like they figured some things out too, especially in that Indiana series. And honestly, to wrap this show up here, I think we can mention that as well is what would that Indiana team have been last year if Tyrese doesn't go down? It would have been a lot more dangerous.
Honestly, I think if they had one more player, Mathurin is not a good playoff player right now, but he's also extremely young on a rookie contract, and he didn't get to play last year.
Yep.
I think even in that whole Indiana team had a lot of, we're not quite ready, but we're enjoying what we can do in this first run. It was like the Thunder last year. The Thunder were really good, but they weren't quite ready. They had never done it. They hadn't been to the playoffs at all. Now you're seeing growth from the Pacers this year. You're seeing growth from the Thunder this year. Those teams, unless they blow 3-1 leads, will be in the NBA Finals. And I do think the Boston Celtics, I wrote this in my story when I wrote on the Pacers a couple months ago. I said they might have gotten swept by the Celtics, but they played the Celtics to me better than any team that played the Celtics in 2024.
No one who watched that series among
period.
Celtics fans is surprised by what they're seeing right now.
Yeah, I love how the Pacers play. I love how Rick has those guys playing. They play a style of basketball that if you're the type of person who thinks every team plays the same, the Pacers, they're the teams that they enjoy playing against the most because they'll just smack you. I mean, it's one thing to see in the regular season. It's another thing to see that they don't conform in the playoffs. They've taken losses this year, and then they come right back the next game ready to run it up or to refocus on the things that they do well. And I have so much respect for them. I have even more respect if they don't blow a 3-1 lead. They still have work to do. That's the
They
thing
do. Yeah, going MSG, you lose that game and it's a series again, I think. Although the Knicks look like they're starting to deteriorate physically a little bit here and fatigue and all that, which you could have seen coming. If they move on, do they have a chance against an Oklahoma City? I want to give them one.
I'm going to give them a chance. I'm not going to pick them. I think, look, Thunder were my championship pick in October. And they've taken some hits. The Grizzlies were up by damn near 30 before Ja got hurt in a game, and obviously the Nuggets took them dudes to 7, and the Timberwolves beat them by 42 points. You ain't never seen a team win a championship after losing a playoff game by 40 in that year. So I did not think the Pacers could beat the Knicks. Actually, I did think they could beat them. I just didn't pick them to beat them. I said that it was going to be Knicks in 7.
I should have picked the Pacers in every.
I should have picked them
against the Bucks.
I'm not even saying that because they're up. I should have picked them because
it was the right call.
I went through how those teams matched up and how they were playing after the All-Star break, and I was like, man, like, what do you like about the Knicks? To pick them. And I just went down and was like, look, I think there's going to be a ton of free throws in that series, and I think the Knicks are going to have an advantage there. Thought like the Pacers are an awful rebounding team, and for the most part, they have been in this series. I thought that was going to overwhelm them, but I mean, I'm just the Pacers have just been that damn good. Tyrese has been that damn good. Pascal Siakam is the most underappreciated player in the playoffs still. There's not a player playing now who is as underappreciated as Pascal Siakam is. And he's been great pretty much every game that they give him the ball.
The game 2 was ridiculous. Gets out to that early start and then just keeps it rolling all the way to 39. That was unreal. And that's a great roster. It's a great construction. It's great depth. I think there's a lot of things you can pull from that situation. If you're
got a lottery pick that's not even playing right now, that they don't hate. He's just not playing. Jarris Walker not playing right now.
But it helps when a team trades you a guy like Halliburton for no good reason.
It's also great though that I don't even think Indiana knew what they had when they got Tyrese. I really don't, because I mean they traded a good player in Sabonis to get him,
a guy they loved.
Yeah, I mean Sabonis was really good. Tyrese was splitting that playmaker duties with De'Aaron Fox, and Rick Carlisle has always been a hard ass on point guards, right? Like he won a championship with Jason Kidd, one of the few guys that Rick didn't like openly clash with. And so like to have a young point guard that he was able to build an offense around, a culture around. I don't know if the Pacers knew that they were getting all that in Tyrese and that he was going to work so well with Rick, given Rick's recent track record. It's a credit to everybody there. And again, I don't want to crown him, but I will say I did right. The finals would be better if it was Pacers rather than Knicks Thunder, and I think that's what we're going to get. We're going to get a good finals that ultimately I think the Thunder wind up winning.
Well, you can read him throughout over on The Athletic. Great stuff from Raw Murray, as always, whether the Clippers or National. It's been a fun postseason to watch from afar for both of us, I'm sure, now that the teams we cover are both home. This series especially has just been crazy. I've loved every minute of it. And I hope we get a little bit more. I wouldn't mind a Knicks win and pushing it back to Indiana, because we don't have finals games until a week from tomorrow. And I know the Thunder thing's ending tonight. So let's stretch this thing out a little longer here.
Yeah, I don't think I'm prepared for game sixes. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
We will see. Thunder Timberwolves tonight. Our guy Joe Sway's out there in Oklahoma City covering that. He might be going back to the finals from what it looks like here after making the move to Oklahoma City. So good for him. Appreciate you all stopping by here. Again, everybody, take advantage of that free Anthony Edwards square over on Prize Picks tonight. Use that code CLNS to let them know we sent you. And that's it for us here. We went through a little bit of the Clippers trade. If you missed it, can the Clippers trade for Jrue Holiday? It looks like it. Just a matter of whether they want to, and whether the Celtics like taking all those contracts back in that scenario. I think they do. We'll see what LA thinks here. And appreciate you all stopping by to talk about that and more, man.
All right. Thanks for having me, man.
And we'll be back, like I said, anytime this week. If there's some news, developments, rumors, we'll jump on and talk about it here. And if not, we'll catch you for a full edition of the Garden Report sometime over the next week here. So again, subscribe and check out all the channels and show some love to the sponsors as we continue to cover the offseason here. And that's it for us today on a Wednesday edition of the Garden Report. Peace.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way.
Let's
Slide Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke an hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke